want to talk about how the mind is conceived in a Bible literalist and really a Calvinist way. The way the mind is typically viewed, I think, everywhere in the world is that it's free, has free will, and it's operating its own program. And I think that, from what I can tell, that is the dominant model of what the mind and the self, if you just equate those for the moment, the mind and the self are in today's world. I don't, as I've said, so many times and things I've written and on this YouTube channel, I don't see any scripture evidence for that. I don't see any evidence of that in my own life and self and people around me. So anyway, but I want to just point out a passage I've talked about before in this YouTube channel, especially when talking about simulation theory, and that's a Luke 11:39 and 40. So we're told in Scripture that God creates all things. Revelations 4:11, Colossians 1:16, 17, Acts 17:24, and on and on and on and on. He's in all things, creates all things, etc. So that includes the mind. Everything. The only thing that he doesn't create is sin. But sin is not a thing. It's a no thing. It's nothingness. It's the void of nothingness in the human soul before it's occupied by, say, God or the devil, for example. It says in Luke 11:39 and 40 that God creates the mind, the inner. And we know that he looks at us on the inside, 1 Samuel 16:7, which is really interesting. We know that, the scripture talking about how the flesh profits nothing, John 6:63. The spirit gives life, the flesh profits nothing. So what does that mean? We can assume that culture has delivered to us the wrong view of the mind. Okay, so if God, God is so different than the world. I mean, we're in his image, but we're a diseased image. Romans chapter 7, so I think 17 and 20 talk about that. And then we're so different from him. The world is, because John 7:7, the works of the world are evil. There's no evil in God, so he's going to appear really different. The idea here, in a sort of a hyper-Calvinist framework, where we really take God's sovereignty to be maximal, which is not what churches are preaching today. There's a lot, they're preaching free will theology, where the human is the one in control. So humanist theology, you can call that, or that mimics Satan's first sin, who wanted to do God's work in Ezekiel 28:17. So how do we look at our minds? Like, for example, think about verses like Job 33:14, really 14-16, talking about how God's always speaking, but we don't hear it. So we're supposed to, or we could, but we don't. So he's speaking to us, and we're probably distracted by all the devil's stuff and the devil's playground, with our minds racing around and stuff, so we don't hear. Deuteronomy 4:36, I think it is. The Lord made thee to hear his voice. That's your purpose. That's why I put that video out about the Antichrist will speak to people in their minds. A video I put out about a month ago. That's what Scripture's saying. Because, the Antichrist is going to mock what God does. So anyway, but there's all these verses about how, so God has full control, and he creates our minds, and also he speaks to us through our minds. Constant revelation, constant signs and so forth from the Lord in the patterns of our minds. So, a different way of looking at the mind would be as follows. The mind is a sort of this stream of imagery that are messages from God. I did a video long ago called "Reality is a Confirmation Stream from the Lord." I think that's the title of it. It's kind of related to that, but sort of modified. So if you have a hardship, and the Lord has created this situation for you, and so you experience it in your mind, so your mind is consumed with this reality of hardship. So what we're taught in our schools and the paradigms of reality is that these things are happening to us from the outside world. We hear our minds over here, the world's out there, and it's doing things to us, which is giving us hardship. My child died, the house burned down, the business went under, something, whatever. But really the proper way, scriptural way to look at this would be as follows. What has the Lord injected into my consciousness? How has he shaped my life? Him having absolute sovereignty, what I call hyper-sovereignty, and some writing I've been doing lately. It's just really just what sovereignty is supposed to have meant originally in Scripture, that God is in complete control. Because now God's sovereignty is called something else, or this free will reality, but which is not a reality of a sovereign God. Read the old Calvinists. This is how they talk. They've predicted an upcoming enemy of Scripture, which is Arminianism. That's the free will theology. All those guys in the 1700s and so forth, like Joseph Hussey, the Hyper-Calvinists. So we have a different direction of activity in our minds. Instead of our minds being shaped by, say, some urges in our own persona mixed with the world, instead it's just simply we're being delivered a reality stream in our mind screen. That article on simulation theory that I published a couple years ago in a journal called Metaphysica, I label the mind as a mind screen. That's what we are, a mind screen. That's what the self is. So you have to kind of get your mind around this. We're so programmed in ways that we don't even understand. That we've always been taught that reality is kind of shaping us. Not really God, but really the forces of life and nature and in the physical world, mixed with, some of our own baggage or whatever from childhood or who knows what. And it's definitely not scriptural. We would instead have to say, this reality I'm in, I know because of my conscious experiences, which are created by God. So from moment to moment to moment, God is creating my conscious reality, shaping where it goes, bringing it exactly where it has to be, and so forth. So the point I'm leading to is a big one here, and that is the following question. Why does God allow it all to be so horrible and evil and horrific? It's really bad out there. Children are living in the streets and being, abused and so forth. That's a little too much to handle. Things are really bad. And so why is the mind screen reality that God is, why is our conscious life, our self, and all the reality that God gives us from moment to moment so bad? And why would God do this? So is he creating all this? The answer has to be yes. Has to be yes. This is the big issue that has really, really messed up theology in evangelism, ecclesiology, I think, since the cross of Christ. So what am I talking about? Nobody knows how to answer this question. Why? So God creates all things, he's sovereign, etc. But things are so bad, so there's got to be, he can't create all that because he's so good. It's right there. Right there. He can't create that because he's so good. That violates Scripture. Okay, that's a huge point. That's what everybody's doing. Church people, seminary professors, worldwide. We've all basically been... It's the problem of evil. Why is there evil when there's this perfect good God? Why is there pain when there's this loving God? Why does he stop it? That issue right there has messed so to speak, everything up. And everybody's going the wrong direction with it. They're basically rejecting Scripture, saying, God didn't create all that stuff. It's the devil or something. Okay, but so there's the big problem. That's where everybody's at, and people just kind of talk about this like it's normal. This is the accepted theology of the day, that all the horrific things going on in the world that God didn't do. That's not scriptural. So let's move on. Then if we move on, then we have to go back to, well, God did create the Holocaust, and he created Hitler, and he created Hitler's behaviors. I mean, he's in control of all things. So if Hitler's going to decree the massacre of people in a Holocaust or whatever, there's examples of this going on in today's world. If you read Voice of the Martyrs magazine, you see this is not a lot's changed. There's massacres going all over the place, just not reported. All over the place, South America, Africa, stuff in the United States, just not on the mainstream fake news. So this is a real big problem. Nobody's going to love a God that's, basically creating us to be killers and murderers and sinners and all this, right? But here's the problem, or here's the issue. It's the only way we can be when we're first created, until God interacts with us with his cross of salvation, which he uses to save us. So everything's great after that. But before that, we are godless monsters. Genesis 6, verse 4. The Lord looked at men and saw that their imagination was only evil continually. No, it's imagination. They didn't even live in reality. Lots of verses say that in the Old Testament. Forgotten concept that human reality is imagination. There's a lot to that. What does that mean? It means exactly what it says. But anyway, here's how you solve that dilemma. God is perfect. There's only one perfect. I've talked about this a bunch of times on this YouTube channel. And that draft of a book I self-published years ago called God Faith has a whole chapter on this. Everything God creates is not perfect. If he creates something distinct from himself, it's not perfect. If he creates perfect stuff, he's creating only just more of himself. That's why I wrote that book, God Faith. That it's just a draft of a book, which I'll work on someday. So the only way God can interact with us is as sinful beasts that we are. So if he's going to create people, it's the only option. He can't create people and give them salvation 2 seconds after he created them. Well, actually, that would be in pre-time, Ephesians 1:4. We were technically created before the world. That's when God knew us. So it'd have to be then. He can't save us back then. Why? Because God uses the cross to save us. The only way, I think, the only way he's going to do it, because that's the way of saving someone by infinite love. Go sacrifice yourself for them the most extreme way. So you're living by infinite love, so you can atone with them, so you can be one with them. All out of sheer love. That's right there. I mean, that's why Christianity is the true religion. I mean, not only because God reveals it to us by revelation and faith, but I mean, just logically, you have to have, if there's a perfect creator, perfect means it's going to be absolute love. It's the greatest conceivable being. It's going to be maximally, nothing greater. It's going to be the greatest love and so forth. This is a logical principle. Of course, it's all through Scripture. But that creator is going to create people because he loves them and he wants to. He's a creator of love, creating worlds all over the place. And the only way he can interact with them is if they are corrupt, because everything he creates is imperfect. That is corrupt, and it's a mess. And his job is, as creator, to come and save it all. Hey, this is the theology that I'm working from. This is the biblical theology. This is the Hyper-Calvinist theology. I'm writing a paper. I'm getting my doctorate at Liberty University right now. I'm writing a paper on a lot of this stuff. It's just a revolution in thought. It takes some getting used to. It just shows how good God is, how powerful, how amazing, how logical. There's this perfect logic, this perfect logical systematic theology that exists in Scripture, which is not really discovered yet. So anyway, that master's thesis I wrote, which is coming out in a book now, Evangelical Calvinist Universal Salvation, I think, there's just a lot to that. It's a whole new way of looking at what's plainly right there in the verses. And there, all the confusion out there, everybody fighting and not knowing what's going on, and nothing makes sense, because people aren't just taking the verses exactly for what they say. It's sort of become normal to just interpret wildly and accept that these Bibles all say different things. You get a contradiction in the NLT, NIV, and so forth that's not in the King James. So, but the point kind of is how can you have Bibles saying different things? Because, well, anyway, that's a separate issue, which I've done videos on before. But anyway, I guess I kind of made a point. You maybe just have to meditate on this, but there's just a big picture here of how, if God's in control, He creates our minds from moment to moment. He is not interested in us having lives of pleasure. He's bringing us through the valley of the shadow of death. That's where we see Him. Life is the valley of the shadow of death, really. The Creator did not put us in fairyland, utopia. Now we're going to be in, the end of all things is near, 1 Peter 4:7. So we're going to be in some kind of reality of infinite spirit with the infinite spirit, God, Yahweh, Christ. So, but I don't know what that means yet. That's beyond thingness. The end of all things is at hand. So just huge concepts, massive concepts. You just have to meditate on all this. I was just sitting here working on some writing, and my mind was just exploding with all these ideas, and I just want to kind of just talk about them, just to throw them out there. So anyway,